So in this video, I want to talk about one of the example of SAT math problem. And the question is, there is a function f of x is equal to 3 over 2x plus b. And in the function above, the b right over here is a constant, which means the constant is a thing that does not contain a unknown quantity such as x or y. Constant just means it is just a number. So let's say if f of 6 is equal to 7, and what is the value of f of 2? So at first, if you look at our function, we can figure out that it is a linear equation. The reason is because for the linear equation, so for a linear equation, in this case, we're going to be a function. So for a linear function, it is formed by a first degree. So first degree x power. So if you look at it, that means it is not a square, it's just a first power, which means the x term right over here, it should always be first power. But even though they didn't write it as first power, we can figure out that it is a linear function. So at first, if we figure out what it is to be b, it is a constant, and which means in the linear function, it will going to be a y-intercept. The y-intercept means the x, so that means x coordinate is 0 and the y coordinate exists. So I'm going to talk about it later. So before we solve for this question, let's think about our solutions for this question. At first, we need to think about the idea how this function works. And also we need to think about the basic format of linear function in order to solve for this question. So before we think about this question, let's think about our function of this question. So for the function of this question, before we think about this, we have learned the linear function, which is a first degree x power. So before we think about our function, I want to talk about it little bit, and let's see, there is a function that is linear function. So it is not a quadratic function, which means if we graph it, it will going to be a straight line. So there will be a straight line. But the straight line is not just a straight line, it is based on its own equation. So let's think about in terms of our function. So for your function, it always requires an input for it. When you input the value, function works as systemically. And then there will be a specific output. So this is how the function works. So in this case, the function of this question is f. And for the f, it sometimes contains the factor for it, but it contains the factors as we have seen right over here, but they didn't give us the value. So I will just call its factor as x. And for the function, it contains a specific equation. So let's think about in this way that the function right over here, it is our specific equation that 3 over 2x, that is equal to 3 over 2x plus b. So at first, all you have to do is fill its value, every missing values. But for the missing value, in this case, we're going to be b, which is a constant. But as we have learned, b is a y-intercept, which means the x value coordinate will going to be 0 and the y value exists. So we can think about that if we input some value to our factor of our function, which is x, we also need to input the value to our equation, and we can see what gives us the value of the b. So for the value of the b, after we write our function down, f of x is equal to 3 over 2x plus b. And they gave us f of 6 is equal to 7, which means we inputted value x, which is a factor of a function, into 6. That means we also need to input the value every single terms that are formed by x terms. So if you simplify it, it will going to be something look like that. And the 7 is a output, which means it is same thing with the f of x value. So we can write it down. 7 is equal to f of 6. So if you input the value of x as 6, 3 over 2 times 6 plus b. We can simplify 3 over 2 times 6. 2 and the 6 we're going to cancel out. And we get 7 is equal to 9 plus b. And we can find our value of a b by subtracting 9 to the both sides to isolate the b term. And we get -2 is equal to b. So we can write our full equation down, the full function down, and we can get that f of x should be equal to 3 over 2x. We already gave it 3 over 2x. We know the value of the b, which we can replace it into -2. So this is our function right over here, and all you have to do is that we can solve for the things that are that they gave us to solve, which will going to be f of 2. So the f of 2 value is same thing that we inputted the value of the 2 into a x term, which means we also need to input the value to a term that has a x value, which will going to be 3 over 2 times 2 plus -2. And if you simplify this value, we get f of 2 is equal to 3 over 2. 2 times 2, we're going to cancel that as 1. We get 3 minus 2, which is 1 in this case. So our answer for this question will going to be C in this case. So at first, the thing that we did is we find the value of the degree x powered. We thought about the things about the linear function. If we graph it, it will going to be a straight line. Also, we think about our function f of x. It contains a specific equation 3 over 2x plus b. So we find the value of the b, which is a y-intercept of a function, and we got the answer that it was the value of it was -2, and we found the value that they asked us, which was going to be f of 2. So f of 2 is equal to 1, which will going to be the answer C in this case. So let's think about it in terms of a graph of this function. The graph of this function is not that important when it comes to solving for this question. But the reason why I'm graphing is because if you go to more advanced SAT function math problem, it's hard to solve for the questions if you don't exactly know about the graphs. So if you think about our graph of this function, we can write our function down that f of x is equal to 3 over 2x plus b, which is we're going to be -2. So f of x is equal to 3 over 2x minus 2. And before graphing, we need to think about one more thing, that f of x is same thing with y, but different form of y. So if we graph it, we can just write this down. F of x is equal to 3 over 2x minus 2. And in order to graph it, we can just input some easy values to graph, such as 0 or 1. But at first, it is a fraction, which means the denominator should be 1 for graphing easier than just a fraction. Which means f of x, we can just input the value of x into 0, which is easy case. We're going to be 3 over 2 times 0 minus 2. This term right over here, we're going to cancel out as 0. We get -2. So f of 0 will going to be -2. And if we graph it, let's make some lines right over here. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So the 0, comma, -2, x value is 0, and then y value is -2, which will going to be on the y-axis. It will be right over here. Let's pick another point. So when x is equal to 2, which simplify this term right over here, then we get f of 2 is equal to 3 over 2. Instead of x value, we input it as 2 times 2 minus 2. 2 and 2 we're going to cancel out as 0. As 1, we get f of 2 is equal to 3 minus 2, which will just going to be 1. So if we graph in the coordinate, it will going to be 2, comma 1. So 2, comma 1 right over here. This point right over here was 0, comma -2. And this point right over here was 2, comma 1. So if you graph the linear function, it will going to be somehow look like this. So the way, if you analyze this function right over here, it is a linear function which is a straight line based on this equation. F of x is equal to 3 over 2x minus 2. And we can see that the line goes through a positive quadrant, which is the first quadrant and the third quadrant. The reason is because the slope of this function is positive, which means it will always go through a positive quadrant. So we thought about the graph of this function, which was based on our function f of x is equal to 3 over 2x minus 2. And the easy things to graph was to pick easy coordinates to graph, such as 1 or 0, which can simplify easily.